Hey, welcome to the Simple Nutrition Podcast, a show that helps you learn practical and actual nutrition tips from an expert. I am your host, Leonila Campos, a registered dietitian with over 8 years of experience in the nutrition field. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Simple Nutrition Podcast. I am your host, Leonila Campos, registered dietitian, and today we are going to talk about mindful eating. Because although it is a huge topic, right, I wanted to discuss, what that is, essentially, and how we can be more mindful when we sit down to eat, and some tips to just help you overall with mindful eating and recognizing some really strong emotions, slightly about emotional eating, but we won't go into so much detail on that topic. I'm actually really excited because one of my dietitian colleagues who works with eating disorders, she will be joining me in one of the episodes, and so I'm excited to have her, Mary Ellen. And so, that episode will be airing sometime, maybe the second weekend of April. So definitely check that episode. But for today's topic about mindful eating, I think it is important to talk about first what that is, right? And so basically, mindful eating is just the practice of bringing awareness and attention to the present moment while we're eating, right? It involves turning into our body's hunger and fullness cues, which is sometimes it's really difficult to really understand. Okay, a lot of the times we feel hungry, but to the point where we're now really hungry, almost hangry, because we haven't had food for a long time. Or we feel super full, right? Because again, maybe we were so hungry, so then we eat fast, and we'll go more into detail in a moment. Or if we eat so much, right, that we bypass those fullness cues, and now we're really full, where we feel uncomfortable, our bellies hurt, we have to button our pants, right, because we ate so much. And so, but there is that in between, right? That sweet spot. And that sweet spot is very different for each person. And so, for someone could be, and we're going to go on, we're going to talk about the scale, right, of hunger and fullness. And so maybe someone, when they eat, right, they eat and they are satiated around, 6, a level 6 or number 6, right? But maybe someone gets full around, 5.5 or 7. And so I think it's really important to recognize that. And we won't be able to know what those hunger and fullness cues are specifically for us if we're not present, right, when we eat. Now, I totally understand that can be difficult when we have a really hectic life and we're just on the go all the time. But I think it is really important to pay attention to that if we're struggling to maybe not eat on time, and because of that, we're going into our next meal really hungry, and now we almost feel like we cannot stop eating because we're so hungry. So we get to that, again, point of eating to where we are super full. So essentially, the mindful eating, that's what it is, the practice of being aware and pay attention to our eating, our hunger and fullness cues, and to savor our food and look at the textures, literally just being present, right? Versus the more traditional eating where we're like just eating mindlessly and eating on the go, and like we forget what we eat, we're distracted all the time. So when that happens, right, we really don't know if we, like, sometimes we even forget, like, did I really eat? And so that can be difficult, right? Okay, full disclaimer here. You are going to hear my little one because he's sick again. I feel like we've been sick since January, the beginning of the year. So you're going to hear him talk and cough and maybe cry or scream. So disclaimer there, we're making it work, right? And that's okay. So bear with me here for a little bit. So yeah, back onto that topic. So why is mindful eating important? One, because when we are present, right, we are really taking in the flavors of the food. We're paying attention to how our bodies feel, right? We're paying attention to, again, those hunger and satiety cues. And that helps with digestion, that helps with our gut health, that helps with our emotions, right? And so how can we maybe start doing some of those tips, right? The first thing that we have to do, again, is bringing awareness, right? So almost assessing how your meals are, the environment, right? The mood, and the things that are happening as you're eating. And then based on that, right, analyzing, okay, where can I make a change? Where can I make some changes to maybe help me be more of a mindful eater, right? And I'm not saying this is not related to any diet. This is completely separate from it. This is paying attention to our bodies, right? What our bodies need, how our bodies feel at the time we sit down to eat a meal. Because that plays a huge role when we have more specific goals, right? And so the first thing that we have to do, right, if we want to start being more mindful when we eat is, okay, where do I eat my meals, right? It might be different areas, depending if you work from home, if you work at an office, or whatever the case may be. And so, look at that. Okay, where do I eat my first meal? And if your first meal is on the go, just because that's how life is, it's very hectic. And if you have kids, you have to get them ready for school, feed them lunch, take them to school. And so if that's the case, don't start with that meal, right? Maybe start with a meal that maybe you have more control over. So for example, in my case, breakfast it's hectic, right? I'm usually on the go. We're usually running late, so we're like, let's go, go, go. And so, although I am mindful, right, I'm present and I am intentional to have my breakfast, but it's not a meal where, I sit down and I take a deep breath and I'm present and I look at the colors and smell the food, taste all the flavors. It's usually, let's go. And so the meal that works for me to be more mindful is lunch, because, I'm pretty much alone, either at my home office or at work office. And so I'm able to really be present, and I pay attention to, okay, where is my hunger when I sit down to eat, right? Then I check in with myself midway. Okay, how am I feeling now? And then I check with myself again at the end of the meal, right? Okay, how do I feel now? Or as I'm finishing my meal, right? If I'm satiated, if I'm like, okay, I had enough, then I stop eating. Now, I completely understand that this can be very difficult to do for someone that grew up with not the habit, right? But something, for example, eating everything on your plate, right? A lot of my patients learned that, right? Because of the scarcity or because there was not enough food, whatever the case may be. And so now as adults have a really hard time stopping, right? Or paying attention to those fullness cues or satiety cues, because even sometimes they tell me, okay, I feel satiated, but just looking at that food on my plate, those thoughts come back to mind when my parent or, whoever the guardian was, like, telling me, finish everything on your plate. And so they ignore those fullness cues just to accomplish that, right? Just to do that. And so that is definitely, it is going to be harder, but it is not impossible, right? We have to almost work at it every single day, every single time, and being okay with it. Now, one of the tricks or tips that we can do there is like, okay, if we know that we're eating whatever amount we serve on our plate, we're struggling to stop eating because we have that in our minds and our brains, and we need to finish everything on our plate. Then next time, serve yourself a little less. Maybe not a significant amount where your brain is like, hey, I'm eating less and I want to be hungry, right? Because we're so used to eating that amount of food. Just slightly less, right? And so every time, serve yourself a little less, to where you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm satiated. I finished my food. again, because we have the mindset that we have to finish everything on our plate. But I don't feel so full where I feel uncomfortable. I feel just fine. And again, that is going to be very different for every single person. And so you have to know that point, right? So there's that. Now, there are several things that can affect, our satiety, that can affect our hunger, that can affect, how fast we eat. And so I think that it is important to also be aware of it. And the environment, right? The environment also has a huge role into when we are eating. Because if we are in an environment that is loud and is, it's causing you to like, oh, I want to get out of here. So then you're going to eat fast, right? Because you're having those feelings of like, just want to eat and get out of here. Or another thing could be like, I eat on my desk. For example, I eat at my desk, right? And I have all these papers and I have all these deadlines and I'm working on my computer, but also eating. That's not mindfulness, right? Do you even know that you're eating? Are you so distracted because you have all these things, going on? And at the end of your meal, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I finished my meal and I'm still hungry, right? Or, what is it that I ate? So we're not present, right? So what I usually recommend, if possible, right, that would be the goal. Don't eat at your desk. Because even if you don't want to check that email, even if you don't want to, write something or look at the computer, it's there. You are going to do it. If you're super busy, which is understandable as well, just stepping away from it to just have your meal. 20 minutes, right? Give yourself 20, 30 minutes to have your meal away from the desk. This applies even if you're home, especially if you're at home, if you work from home, because everything is around that, right? Like you're home all day. And, as you start your meal, you're almost like, what's the point, right? I'm here all day. And so step away, right? You have the chance to go outside, maybe sit down, eat your meal, right? While you look at the sky or the trees, I don't know. But the environment of where you eat your food also plays a huge role with that mindfulness. Same thing with, let's say for dinner. And I'm sure dinner is as busy or maybe busier than breakfast, right? Because you're on the go all the time. And so dinner can be super, super busy, right? The kids need something or you're just busy and you have other things to do. Maybe you have other things to do after dinner. So that also plays into the mindfulness of how we eat. But it is so important to, as you're practicing mindful eating, right, to remove distractions, to remove things that are going to distract you from really paying attention to your body. Again, if dinner is a meal where you're like, I can't be present because my kids need something every minute of the hour, completely understand. I have 2 kids. So then don't choose dinner, right? You have to focus on the meal that you have more control over. And then eventually you can work on another meal. And then that's how you get your goals. But some of those things, right? So look at your environment, where you eat your meal. But also what you want to do, right, is as you are sitting down to eat your meal, checking in with those emotions that you have, right? If you're coming into your meal like really, really angry or anxious or stressed because you just had a conversation with a coworker or your boss and whoever, and now you're coming into this meal really, with these strong emotions, that could be the same thing, right? We're eating, but we're not thinking, we're not present because we're thinking about what happened previously, right? And so what can help in those cases is just sit down, right? Take a deep breath, maybe a few, 3 to 5 deep breaths, and just be present, right? Okay, I understand that this happened. I'm really angry, or I'm really upset, or I'm really sad. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be present and enjoy this meal, right? Again, depending on how strong the emotions are, we might not be able to decompress and be mindful. But again, the more that we practice that, the better that we get at it. And so the first thing to do, right, is come sit down, check in with yourself, right? How am I feeling right now? Let me take a few deep breaths. And at least for these 30 minutes that I have, 20 minutes that I have to eat my meal, I am going to be present, right? If possible, then use your phone. Again, that's a distraction. And then we're not present, right? But if you can, then you do what you want to do, my friend. But those are some of the tips there. So we talked about environment. We talked about checking in with yourself, right? As you start to eat your meals. And as you start to eat your meals, and then at the end of the meal, to see how you are feeling. Now, the other thing too, right, that we want to focus on is, okay, how long does it take me to finish my meal from when I start to when I finish, right? If you're a fast eater, that could be 5-10 minutes, right? And that's really fast. We're almost like wolfing down the food and like just like swallowing it without chewing it. And so that can also have an effect in our digestive system, right? Because it takes longer, it takes more work for our digestive system to break down the food to be able to absorb it. But the other thing too, right, is that when you think about yourself, you're interconnected, right? It's not like your brain is, separated from your extremities and your stomach is separated from your heart and your brain. We are all interconnected, right? And so as you eat your food, there's different processes that are happening at the same time, but also your stomach, the sensors and the nerves are communicating, and your stomach are communicating with your brain, right? You have, again, these fullness cues that happen as our stomach is stretching, right? That's sending signals to your brain. And so that connection of your brain and your stomach to tell you, hey, you ate enough, you're satiated, takes about 20 minutes or so. And so if we eat so fast and we finish a meal in 5 minutes, right, we haven't allowed for that connection to happen. And so we either feel that we're still hungry, so we continue to eat, and now we ate more than we were, supposed to eat, or we ate more to that level where now we feel really full and we feel uncomfortable. Again, because we didn't allow those systems to connect, to have that connection and to communicate, because we ate so fast, right? So it's important to also be mindful of that, and how that affects the way that we eat, how much we eat, and how we feel at the end of that meal. So far what we talked about is the environment of where we have our meals, how we feel emotionally about our meals, the timing, right, and how fast we eat. And what else? I mean, there's so much to talk about, but those are a few of the things that really come into play. What is, one of the things that really comes time after time is emotional eating, right? And again, I'm going to bring in an expert in eating disorders and emotional eating. We're going to talk about that. But I think it is important, right, to just briefly mention it, that our emotions can have a huge impact in the foods that we eat, in the amount that we eat, how often we eat, right? And so as we are eating and as we are mindful of what we eat, how much we eat, the environment we eat, it can help to recognize, okay, I am an emotional eater, right? Or I eat when I have these strong feelings. But not to punish yourself at all, right? Or to feel guilty, but to recognize it and then, create a plan and then do something to help you if that is something that you feel like you need help with, for whatever reason. And so, but yeah, the mindfulness can have a huge impact. So, but I don't want you to practice mindful eating as a way of restriction or as a way of punishing yourself or as a way to feeling guilty, but more so to just really being in tune with yourself, being in tune with your body. Like, what does your body need? How does your body feel at the moment? I've had lots of clients that tell me, when I sit down to eat, I'm so busy that I want to multitask, and I do this too, right? When I have a really packed day, and I literally just have time to, eat something and then move on to, whatever the next session that I have or whatever I need to do. And so, these are things that I'm still working on, right? And so it's not something that I'm using it again to punish myself or to feel I don't have control over it, but it's more so because I want to be present when I eat my food. I want to make sure that when I eat it, I feel satiated, right? And I enjoy my food. And so practicing that helps. But again, it's not a way of like creating these restrictive rules, creating these really strict rules of eating, right? It's more so to help yourself with digesting better, feeling more relaxed when you're eating, right? Giving yourself that time to really be present and enjoy what you're eating, and just that time for yourself. That it can help, because when we think about it, right, for the most part we eat 3 times a day, but even if you don't, however many times you eat, right, having been present will help. So what I encourage you to do is, again, to approach this mindful eating, which is an open mind and a way of curiosity, right? Okay, how am I going to feel after I start practicing these, right? Again, the end result, it's going to depend from person to person, right? It's totally right there. And so, basically just bringing awareness. Again, start very small, be patient with yourself, and remember that every mindful bite is an opportunity to nourish both your body, your mind, and your soul. And just a way of doing more self-care, right? So, I mentioned that I was going to tell you about the mindful or the fullness and satiety scale. So I'm going to show you that here. Let me see if I can. Now, if you're just listening, you can always go into my YouTube video, which I linked in the show notes. And the resources that I have here that I'm going to show you, I also created a quick guide for mindful eating. That's going to be in the show notes too, so you can just go take a look at that. But again, if I'm going to show something right now on the screen, don't worry. You'll have that resource in the show notes. But if you want to follow me as I go along, you can watch my YouTube video, and that's going to be there as well. Okay, so let's share the screen here. Down, preview. Let's see if I can open that. That was me. Okay. Now, the hunger and fullness scale may seem like it's a big concept, right? Again, especially if we haven't practiced that, we haven't practiced those cues. Then again, just starting very small, just being okay with it. That is, again, something that it's going to take time to really understand. But the other thing too that I want to really emphasize here, right, is again, depending on how we grew up, in terms of food, in terms of like finishing our plate, don't waste food. I think it's important to recognize that, right? Again, the behaviors that we have that have been rooted for a long time, being aware of them, right? Because that can explain why we do things that we do. And so not because, it just happened overnight, right? So I think that is important to understand. Okay, so here we go. So this scale, it goes from 1 to 10, right? And 1 being extremely hungry, right? Painfully hungry. You haven't had food for days, maybe weeks. And, and you're painfully hungry. Right? You have this, you're hurting because you're hungry. So it says here, have symptoms like dizziness, you feel nauseous, irritable, shaky, right? You need to eat right away. We don't want to get to that point, right? Because usually that your survival part of the brain is going to kick in and it's not going to care what you eat. It just wants to eat for survival, right? Our bodies are always going to try to do anything that it can to keep you alive, right? To help you survive. So who cares what you eat at that moment? Just feed me, because who knows what's going to happen. Similarly, number 2, right? Very hungry, difficulty concentrating. You may feel ravenous, irritable, or anxious to eat. Your stomach is growling. That's a physical sensation, right, that you're having. Number 3, you have increased thoughts about food and eating, ready to eat, but not overly ravenous. Ideal time to start eating around number 3, right? Number 4, starting to think about food, deciding what you would like to eat. Stomach may begin gently growling, but you're like, you can wait. Number 5 is neutral, right? You're not hungry, you're not full. Essentially, that's where we want to be, right? Most of the time, as again, we eat a meal and then the process starts again. 4 or 5, right? You definitely want to start eating when you feel a 3. Increased thoughts about food and eating, ready to eat, but you're not ravenous, right? What we want to avoid is getting into the 2s and 1s, because again, that's a survival mode. Like, we need to eat right away. Who cares while we eat? Feed me. Hungry, right? And then as we eat, right, we are beginning to feel emerging fullness, slightly full, not hungry anymore, right? When you 8, you want to be at a 6. Maybe 7. That's pushing it a little bit. You feel number 7. You feel comfortably full. You feel satisfied and content. Again, ideal time to finish eating. And then number 8, a little too full. Doesn't feel pleasant, but it has not yet emerged into an uncomfortable fullness. Number 9, very full, too full. You feel uncomfortable, as if you need to unbutton your pants or remove your belt. And number 10 is painfully full, like stuffed. You may feel nauseous or sick because you ate too much, right? So again, we want to try to avoid 8, 9, 10. After you eat, you want to stay in around 6 or 7, where you're like, okay, I'm comfortably full. I'm satisfied. I'm not hungry anymore. Finish eating. And then when you start to get hungry, right, you want to start eating around 3. Increased thoughts about food, ready to eat, but not overly ravenous. A lot of the times we can push our meals, right? Okay, I ate at 12, right? And I'm hungry around 3. I know dinner is not until 6. So I'm at a 3 level, right? That I know that if I don't eat something right now, by the time I get to eat dinner at 6, I am going to be at around 2 or 1. And so most likely around 2. So it's best to eat something at that moment, right? A balanced snack. Again, you can go back to my previous episodes when I talk about making balanced snacks, but think of something like protein or a healthy fat with a fruit or a vegetable, for example. It could be edamame, right? That's protein with an apple. Or it could be, if you eat dairy, it could be Greek yogurt with berries, right? Protein, fruit, something like that, to hold you over until you have your dinner. Otherwise, again, you're going to be very hungry and you're not going to care what you eat. Who cares? Just feed me, because I'm hungry, and if I don't eat right now, I'm going to pinch you. So we want to avoid that. The other thing why we want to avoid to get to that super hungry level, as I mentioned previously, is because then you eat very fast, right? And you're not present with those cues where you're not paying attention to when you feel satiated, right? That you're getting to that level 7, 6 or 7. And so then we push the limits, right? Because we're so hungry. And so now you gotta wait, okay? I'm almost done. So now we are extremely hungry, and then we get super full and we're very uncomfortable. So again, it's like this snowball effect, right? Now, it's okay if you don't know these numbers, personally. Okay, awesome. So, yes, definitely, we don't want to follow that cycle, right? That snowball effect of getting super hungry, maybe pushing our time to eat, to get to that level 2, and then getting super full where we feel uncomfortable, we feel nauseous, or we just feel painfully full. Practicing that, right, again, is you're not gonna get it right away. You're probably not even going to get it the first, I don't know, 5, 10 times, right? Give yourself that time to be able to really recognize the hunger and satiety cues, especially if we have follow like really restrictive rules, or if we don't know how our bodies feel when we feel hungry and when we feel satiated. Give yourself plenty of time. Be kind to yourself, right, in that regards. Give yourself some grace. But what is really going to help is practicing those mindfulness tips that we talked about, right? Being present with your meal, checking in with yourself, look at your environment, try to minimize the distractions that around you or next to you when you are going to have your meal. Start with the easiest meal that you have, to have to really be present, and then as you get better at it, move on to the next meals. And what else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. So what my challenge, my task to you is, if this is something that you want to try, right? Again, start with the easiest meal. Practice that mindfulness, meaning sit down to eat, take a few deep breaths before you start eating. Try to eliminate the distractions that you have. If you have these really strong emotions that are happening at the moment of the mealtime, being aware of it, but also try to give yourself the time, giving that time of your mealtime to be present, right? And then again, practicing that, using the hunger and fullness scale to help you recognize your hunger and fullness cues. And yeah, okay, my friend. So again, these resources are going to be in the show notes. Check them out, use them, and share the episode with a friend or a family member. I really appreciate your support, and thank you for coming back. I'll talk to you in another episode. But this podcast, the links and resources provided are for the purpose to educate only and are not a replacement for medical advice or nutrition therapy. I suggest you seek out the help of a trained professional to help you with your specific situation and needs.